Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us today. This is Lohit here from Telric, India. This is part of our regular monthly webinars that we do here in the Telric, India region. And then today we're going to be looking at a very specific topic, which is very kind of dear to me, ASP.NET. So as you can see, till like a week back, it used to be ASP.NET 5, but Microsoft has renamed it. They're known to kind of come up with these kind of naming. So it's no more ASP.NET 5, which we all were actually looking forward to from kind of 1 year, but they have been renamed it to ASP.NET Core 1.0. So that's the marketing name, or that's the brand name that's going to be now used. And this today we're going to be looking at what exactly is this. And as you can see, I put up cross-platform web application. Well, if you have been developing ASP.NET, pretty much I'm sure that you know for the fact ASP.NET cannot be installed outside of Windows platform. Meaning, till now you could run ASP.NET web applications only on a Windows-based server because ASP.NET required IAS. Where do you get IAS? IAS is available on a Windows machine. So there you go. So you had to put a hardware, like you need to purchase the Windows Server hardware and then go ahead and then install ASP.NET or deploy ASP.NET. Many enterprises would stay away from this because there's a lot of cost involved in getting those servers and then setting it up. Mind you, developing ASP.NET is $0, meaning you can just pick up a notepad or a text pad, or even for now, we have Visual Studio Community Edition, which is free for an individual developer or free for a company which is less than 5 in numbers, right? You can just pick it up and then start doing it. But the main problem was deployment. Where do you deploy? You need a server. The server is costlier. So many enterprises still follow the pattern of, like, we will put up a Linux based server and then that's where we want to deploy. So ASP.NET couldn't do that, so they stayed away and then said, oh no, if that's the case, we don't want to go the ASP.NET way. That's how it was in the enterprise. So Microsoft has been trying hard from a year, and then they changed their strategy and they said, okay, you know what, let's go cross platform, meaning you can run ASP.NET on Windows, or you can run ASP.NET on a non-Windows platform or non-Windows systems also. So that's the whole goal of ASP.NET Core. It's all about taking your ASP.NET web application across platforms, Windows, Linux, or OS X, you name it, you can run it. So that's the whole funda behind this particular ASP.NET Core. If you have been attending, if you have been regular, you will know by now who I am. My name is Lohit. I work as a technical evangelist with Telric in India. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Visual Studio on development technologies, mainly focusing on ASP.NET. And that's some of my coordinates. You can always get through this coordinates. This webinar is recorded. You can go kind of write this down later, but those are all my coordinates. Telric.com is our global website where you will come to know Telric as a company. What do we do? What are the products that we provide? TelricHelper.net is a small website that myself and then my colleagues in Telric India, we run that, where we kind of we kind of write what is how do you work with a particular technology in Telerik, how do you do this in Telerik control, or those kind of things. And then this webinar also will be hosted on telrichelper.net. So this is recorded. If you have to leave in between, we understand it's a daytime, you have your day of work, so we understand that. And then don't worry, you are covered. Just go to telrichelper.net by next week. So .NET in 2015, that's what I wanted to bring up. Currently, if you're not following the Microsoft world closely, well, this will be a kind of a surprise to you, or this will be kind of a shocker to you. Like, we have two frameworks. Well, un unfortunately or fortunately, yes. At this moment, in .NET in 2015 has two frameworks. One is .NET Framework 4.6, and then the newest one, or the rewritten framework called as .NET Core 1.0. So what is .NET Framework 4.6? Well, it's a full features .NET Framework implementation on Windows. I like to call this as full stack. I like to kind of label this as full stack, meaning This is the traditional .NET framework that we all have been working from last 14 years or 15 years, right? So there's no change in that one. It is still there. It will exist. It will keep on improving. There is .NET 4.6, wherein you can develop the web, the console, the Windows, you name it. But you cannot use this .NET framework on devices. For example, Raspberry Pi, Galileo, I don't know, some more IoT, based devices. You can't run that. Why? Because there is a the framework itself is little heavy, and there are a lot of overheads that are sticking to Windows, right? That's where Microsoft started. That is the Windows platform, and most of the things in this .NET Framework 4.6 have a close affinity to this Windows platform. That's why you cannot go cross-platform, meaning you cannot take a .NET Framework 4.6 and then run on a Linux or a Mac OS or on a Raspberry Pi. No, you can't. So what Microsoft did was they rewrote the .NET framework and they call it as .NET Core 1.0. So now as a developer, you have the choice of using two things. Do you want to use .NET Framework 4.6 or do you want to use .NET Core 1.0? Notice the icons there. .NET Framework 4.6 is Windows only. Whereas if I want to run my application on a Windows machine, or I want to run my application on a Linux machine, or I want to run my application on an OS X, Macintosh, yeah, that's when you go and then choose your runtime to be .NET Core 1.0, right? So that's what this means. So there you go. So this is what it is all about. Machine-wide installation on Windows, desktop, web, and cloud workloads is what you can do with .NET Framework 4.6. Whereas .NET Core 1.0, it's all about Linux, OS X, Windows, run side by side. You can have a .NET Framework 4.6 on a Windows machine, and then I can also have a .NET Core 1.0 running on a same Windows machine. So you can run side by side. .NET Core is supposed to be modular. When we start writing the code, you will see how modular it is. For example, many people are, I've been working on ASP.NET for 15 years, so I know for sure that when you create a file new ASP.NET project, there's a lot of pipeline, there's a lot of handlers that are being put up, although I may not need them. But there's no way you will know that if you're a newbie, or even if you're an experienced person. You think like, there's nothing happening, but under the hood there's a lot of pipeline that get executed. There's a lot of handlers that get executed. Maybe I don't need those handlers, maybe I don't need those pipeline, right? So you'll need to figure out why my startup is slow. You'll need to figure out what is happening in each request, and then go and then say like, oh, don't run this handler for my request, or don't run this pipeline for my request, right? So we used to call those things as magic strings or magic stuff that Microsoft puts it. But with .NET Core, Microsoft has taken a stand wherein it's like, hey, if you say file new project, it's going to be empty, literally empty. You need to come in as a developer and say, hey, you know what? In this project, I need to use MVC. Hey, you know what? In this project, I want to use static file serving. For example, I want to create just an HTML file and then serve that. Yeah, that's what this whole modularity is all about. You decide what you want. They're not going to put it by default. Plus, .NET Core 1.0 is optimized for web, cloud, and devices. That's the biggest thing. If you have a Raspberry Pi and you're running a version of Linux on it, well, now nobody stops you from running ASP.NET on those devices. Just build an ASP.NET web application, target .NET Core 1.0, do a build on your machine, meaning package on your machine. All you need is that folder. That folder, just take it, put it on the device. That folder contains your code. That folder contains the runtime. That's it. It runs on Linux, or it runs on OS X, or whatever that you put on device. So I'm really, really excited to see ASP.NET go places. So let's go deep and then start looking into different things. So this is what it is all about. .NET 4.6, it uses runtime components like next-gen JIT. It's called as RUJIT. Very, very optimized, very, very fast. It uses language innovation, .NET compiler as a platform, all those things. Well, .NET Core is available as a NuGet package, right? So for example, .NET Core 1.0 libraries are available as a NuGet package. So you just keep the NuGet packages in your output folder, and then that's it. You're up and go, right? So this is how it is. On a .NET 4 Framework 4.6, You can create a WPF, Windows Forms, and an ASP.NET 4.x. With .NET Core 1.0, you can create ASP.NET Core 1.0 or a Universal Windows apps. Mind you, Universal Windows apps can be run on a device. That's because it's targeted towards Core, and then Core runs on the devices. So that's how cool it is. So this is what it is all about. So you can create an ASP.NET 4.x, meaning it's gonna be Windows only. It cannot run anywhere else. Or you can go and then create ASP.NET Core 1.0, meaning it can run on Windows, it can run on Linux, it can run on Mac OS X. So just keep these things in mind. There are two runtimes now: .NET Framework 4.6, .NET Core 1.0. That is all you need to know. There are two core frameworks. There are two core runtimes available now. So just to give you this is a fantastic visualization, or this is a fantastic kind of a flavor mapping that Microsoft has, and then I had to pick this up and then give it to you guys. So what you see on the left hand side is just a label which says ASP.NET 4.6. On the right you have ASP.NET Core 1.0. So if you take any application on the Windows, or on any web application on the Windows side or on the .NET side, well, you have these many sections, or as I like to call it, as flavors within the application, right? You have, of course, the application itself, then you have libraries, then you have an application framework, then you need a web server to host it, host your application, then you need a application host who knows how to run your code. Then you have platform libraries. Of course, there's a runtime. The runtime is nothing but your .NET framework. And who loads the runtime, right? You need a runtime loader. That's done by the OS. And then, of course, the bottom line, the OS itself, right? So now, if you, these are the flavors, as I like to call it, in your application. Now I'm going to go and then see how this maps out to ASP.NET 4.6. Remember, I like to call this as full stack, or full stack on the Windows, right? So the application itself is csc.exe, meaning not many people know this, but within your Visual Studio, when you do Control Shift and a B, or a build, right? The Visual Studio is actually invoking under the hood a compiler called a C# compiler, or a VB compiler, vbc.exe, or a csc.exe, right? So you have MS Build, you have Code DOM. Code DOM helps to go through and then make sure, notice whenever you have missed a semicolon or you have missed a dot or something like that, you get the squigglies coming up, a red squiggly or a green squiggly, right? We call it as red and squigglies. That is possible through the code DOM. So code DOM is nothing but an expression tree, and Visual Studio has the smartness to go pick up your code, run it through the code DOM, and then figure out if there's a syntax error or whatever it is, right? That's how it maps. Libraries, you have the libraries in the loose meaning I can just put a DLL in a bin and then it starts working, or I have a DLL in the GAC, or I get the library through the NuGet, right, as a NuGet package. Similarly, the application frameworks, I can get it as in the GAC, or it's there in the NuGet. The web server, of course, it's IIS. There's nothing else other than IIS which can run it. There are some other combinations available now. If you are on ASP.NET MVC 5, you can actually self-host your ASP.NET application. You don't need IIS, right? And then this is the biggest thing. Who is hosting your app, right? So that's the system.web. This DLL is like a huge ocean which has everything that the ASP.NET needs, and that's the baggage, or that's the thing which is causing ASP.NET 4.6, the full stack, not to run on a non-Windows platform, because there's a tight coupling between system.web and the IIS. A lot of things have been written inside that. And the platform libraries are, we all know .NET Base Class Library, the BCLs. Runtime is .NET CLR, the full stack CLR or full CLR. Then runtime loader is, of course, basically in the IAS, you have the Web Engine 4.dll, which loads the .NET runtime, and then, make sure that all the .NET requests are handled by the runtime. And the operating system is Windows only. The ASP.NET 4.6 is Windows only, right? Now let's take a look at our the newest member in the family. That's ASP.NET Core 1.0. So the application, the way this runs is the way you had MS Build. Now it's called as DNX, or .NET Execution Environment. So DNX, .NET Execution Environment. Basically, it uses Roslyn under the hood to compile your code on the fly. You use all the libraries as NuGet, no DLL, no GAC, nothing. It's all a NuGet package that you will need to include in your project, and that's it. Then again, the application framework, the whole .NET Core 1.0 is available as a NuGet package within your project. And the web server, this is interesting thing. So you can run, remember I told ASP.NET Core can run on Windows. So on the Windows, what you can do is you can still make use of IAS to host it. Or Microsoft has gone ahead and then written a brand new web server called as Kestrel. And this Kestrel is a cross-platform web server. Runs on Windows, runs on Linux, runs on OS X. Fantastically written cross-platform web application. And just 2 days back or 3 days back, we were monitoring the meaning the community was looking forward to how the Kestrel is doing or the ASP.NET Core is doing in terms of performance. You wouldn't believe it. Kestrel or ASP.NET Core 1.0 can serve 1.15 million requests per second. I'm not making this out. You can actually go and search for this. ASP.NET Core 1.0, 1.15 million. If you search for that, you will actually see ASP.NET team, which has published this metric, the performance metrics. If you use ASP.NET Core on .0 and then build a ASP.NET web application, you can get 1.15 million requests being served per second. That's tremendous. That's beating pretty much any web server that you can think of that's there, right? They were actually behind. My voice is going on off at times. Looks like either connectivity between me and you, or the network that you have on your end. So sorry about that. So what I was saying was Kestrel is the new web server, and it can serve 1.1 1.15 million requests in a second. That's how huge the improvement is. Then application host itself. So as I said, there was system.web. Now it's going to be DNX or .NET Execution Environment. The platform libraries are still going to be the .NET BCL, but it's going to be as a NuGet package. The runtime. Here is the interesting thing. You can actually, if you're on a Windows machine, you can pretty much, the .NET Core CLR can run on the Windows or as a Linux. So there's a .NET Core CLR now, and the runtime loader. So it's going to be DNX or .NET Execution Environment. And operating system. That's for the first time in 15 years we can see this ASP.NET running on OS X or Linux. Right. That's as excited I am. So as you can see, it's fantastic. If in order to prepare for this webinar, I had to. In 15 years, I never touched Linux, but I had to go and then create a VM, put Linux on it, and then run this guy. And then believe me, it was a sheer joy to see that coming and then see the ASP.NET running on a Linux machine. So this is all open source, by the way. That's the biggest stuff. Everything that you see on ASP.NET Core is open source. The DNX is open source, Roslyn is open source, Kestrel is open source, the .NET BCL that is the .NET Core CLR is open source. You can actually go take a look at the code and then look for yourself what the team is doing, right? How they're writing it, all those things you can do it. You can build .NET Core CLR on your machine because it's open source. Just go clone it, and then they use certain build mechanisms, go through the documentation, and you can build .NET Core CLR on your machine. Right. So what are the, okay, sorry, should have changed the slide deck there. I made a typo. So it's not ASP.NET 5. Let me just quickly change it. Give me a second. Oh, where is my, yeah. So this is Core 1.0. So let me go back. Yeah, so ASP.NET Core 1.0 key values, totally modular. I'm going to showcase a demo of that. Seamless transition from on-premises to cloud. So many times we have heard oh, it's working on my machine, but when I put it to the cloud, well, it just doesn't work. Well, that's no more a case with ASP.NET Core. You just take the folder, put it up, it's going to run because the runtime is packaged within the folder, right? And it's a very, very, very small footprint. Open source with contributions, faster development cycle, choose your editor and tools. that's interesting. You can use Visual Studio Code, as I said, or you can use Sublime, or you can use, I mean, Sublime, of course, it won't give you the IntelliSense. If you're used to Visual Studio, stick to Visual Studio. If you're coming from Linux world, well, you can use Visual Studio Code on Linux. And biggest thing, it's cross-platform and fast, 1.15 million requests per second, right? So there are a couple of things that you will need to first understand. There is two things, major two things that you'll come across. One is DNVM and DNX. DNVM starts for .NET Version Manager. So there are two core runtimes running now. There's a core CLR and then there is a CLR also, meaning which can run on a Windows machine. So you can manage, as the name says, version manager. You can actually run a same ASP.NET web application under different runtimes. You may have one application running, the same application running against 1.0 of core CLR, and you can run the same application in another shell targeting maybe 1.1, which is coming up, runtime. And then the .NET DNX stands for .NET Execution Environment, and that's the host which is responsible for kind of running most of the stuff. So these are two things that you will keep hearing, and then these are two things that you will pretty much find yeah, all over .NET Core, ASP.NET Core. So now coming to interesting stuff, developing on Linux. How do you start, right? So of course, first you need to have a Linux machine. Uh, at this moment, the ASP.NET Core is supported only on 64-bit Linux. I figured it out only last midnight yesterday. I had created a VM which is a 32-bit VM with a 32-bit Linux variant, and I installed everything, and then but the commands won't run. So I cracked my head, and then finally I was able to make sure, like because I'm an MVP, I have this close knit of 4,000 plus MVPs all over the world who are ASP.NET MVPs. So I just wrote an email saying like, hey, I'm stuck. So am I doing something wrong? They said, you know what? What's your bitness of the Linux system that you have? I said, I have a 32-bit. They said, there you go. The ASP.NET Core at this moment runs only on a 64-bit Linux. And I had to immediately create a 64-bit Linux, do the same installation again, and then voila, so it works. So what is the procedure? Well, you will need to install DNVM. I'm going to showcase the documentation how you can do all these things. And then once your DNVM is installed, the .NET Version Manager is installed, you will need to install DNX, that is the .NET Execution Environment, and then tell it to get the core CLR runtime. Once that is done, you'll need to install Kestrel prerequisites. Kestrel, as you know, as I said, is a cross-platform web server, so you will need the Kestrel prerequisites to be installed. Of course, you'll need Node.js, npm, and Yeoman generator. So remember, on Linux, you don't have like a Visual Studio which can do file new project kind of stuff, right? So what do you do? So the community came up with a fantastic idea. So Yeoman is nothing but it's a code generator. So what they said was, well, let's use Yeoman, and then we will scaffold a ASP.NET Core 1.0 MVC application, right? So you'll need to install Yeoman generator, and then also Yeoman has this very specific ASP.NET generator. You'll need to install that. And how do you create a ASP.NET application on Linux? Just say yo ASP.NET, I mean ASP.NET, and that's it. It will scaffold an MVC app for you which is targeted towards ASP.NET Core 1.0, right? That's as simple as it can get. So now what I've done is I've already created a couple of stuff. Let me bring in my VM now. So I would have to adjust this VM. So let's see. I think this is the max I can go. Yeah. I hope this is visible to everybody. So this is actually uh, a variant of Linux is called as Ubuntu. It's a variant of Ubuntu called as Xubuntu. It's a fantastic desktop that it comes up. So I just searched around and came to know that Xubuntu is pretty good. So what I've done is I've already gone ahead, used my Hyper-V virtualizer to create a virtual machine on my desktop. So my host machine or my host laptop is Windows 8.1, and it comes with Hyper-V manager, and then using Hyper-V manager, what I have done is I've created a Linux or X Ubuntu image, right? It's nothing but you just create a VM and then say, hey, install X Ubuntu on it, and then you will pretty much get this VM created. I'll come up with a video maybe later so that it's easier for you guys to follow up with that. So now let me show you how this looks like. So this is X Ubuntu. There you go. So pretty similar to Windows, and whatever you need is here. You can go in and then check for, show me everything. So pretty much whatever you know of, but this is a variant of Ubuntu or variant of Linux, right? So now remember what we had to do. We had to install a DNVM, install DNX, and then core CLR and all those things. So now inside this particular VM. So let me show you all those stuff. So the first things to be done is to go to docs.asp.net. This is the new documentation site that Microsoft is maintaining now, and this will give you all the things that you need. So for example, they still have ASP.NET 5. That's because the decision to change the name came in only last week, and then slowly whatever assets they have, they will start changing the name to ASP.NET Core 1.0. So that's going to take some time because they have huge assets like MSDN. This is a new documentation site. I like this new documentation sites very well. So there you go. ASP.NET 5 is being renamed to ASP.NET Core 1.0. Read more. So this is the blog post that came out like I think starting of this month. As you can see, February 1st, they wrote out this particular blog post, and they said, hey, we're going to be changing the name, right? So you can just go read it later. I don't know why it's not loading. And now if you see here, there's this thing called as installing ASP.NET 5 on Windows, installing ASP.NET 5 on Mac OS X, installing ASP.NET 5 on Linux. So what I'm going to do is, before creating it on maybe here in the Linux, let me, I don't want to leave Windows behind. So I'm going to go and maybe launch my Visual Studio, and then so if you install Visual Studio 2015, you will be getting ASP.NET Core. If you install it now, the ASP.NET the Visual Studio 2015 is actually bundled with a beta version of ASP.NET 5 or ASP.NET Core 1.0. The moment you install Visual Studio, if you see the notification, it will start showing you updates. There's already 2 updates available, so you will need to, update 1 available, so you'll need to put those updates onto Visual Studio, and then you will get the latest ASP.NET Core, which is nothing but RC1. Mind you, ASP.NET Core 1.0 is still not ready for production. Okay, the Microsoft does not endorse you to go use this on a production yet. It is still a release candidate. We call it as RC1. I'll show you the runtime, and then I'll show you that. So let my Visual Studio come up. By the time, let me see if I have any questions, because my Visual Studio is going to take some time to come up. I have too many things running, so it may be a little slow. So let's give it maybe a couple of seconds, and by the time I'll just go and then show you what they mean, like how do you install it on maybe Windows, right? So installing ASP.NET 5 on Windows is as simple as get install ASP.NET 5 with Visual Studio, or you can actually install ASP.NET 5 from the command line, meaning when we say ASP.NET 5, keep in mind it is ASP.NET Core 1.0. Okay, so you can install it through Visual Studio, or you can install it through the command line. So how do you install through Visual Studio? Just make sure that there's a one check. Question, you said 1.5 million clicks will be served per second. I said 1.5 million requests per second. In a second, if you have 1.5 million people hitting your website, yes, all those 1.5 million will be serviced by the web server. So that's what it means. 1.515, not 1.5 actually, I think they're at 1.15 million requests per second. How about publish into IIS? There is any specific server for OS? No, so that's what I said. You can run ASP.NET Core 1.0 using Kestrel, the new web server, or you can still make use of IIS to run your ASP.NET Core 1.0. It's up to you. But of course, on a non-Windows platform, that is Linux or OS X, it's going to be Kestrel, because there's no IIS on a OS X, or there's no IIS on a Linux, right? So what do you need there? Well, Microsoft went ahead and then created this web server called as Kestrel, and then that's what you use on a non-Windows platform. I don't know why my Visual Studio has not come up yet. How will manage the memory of page execution for 1.5 million clicks per second? Well, that's the whole thing about this web server, right? So that is what the web server is meant to be. That's what the performance is all about. That's what Microsoft has been working on for last 1.5 years, or 1 year for sure, that I know. Will you be covering publishing to IS? I'm having trouble with that. Well, let me see. I still need to get my Visual Studio coming up. Let's see how the time is, and then my focus today is mostly on the Linux side of the things. But I just in the morning, what I did was I actually published ASP.NET Core 1.0 application to Azure, so I can actually show you that. So here it is. So if you go to BLR cloudroadshow.azurewebsites.net. So I'm actually I just published this in the morning. I was just practicing, and then I saw like, okay, let me check this out, and nothing, no problem there. It just went ahead, and as you can see, it's coming up, so it's warming. So let me see my Visual Studio. It's not yet there. Looks like my network has some issues. Let's wait for it. There's a question. So going away, going forward, GAC will slowly fade away behind the scenes with the advent of ASP.NET Core 1.0. Mind you, I'm talking about ASP.NET Core 1.0, correct? So these things only matter to Core. These things do not matter to ASP.NET 4.6. That's the full stack, or the full CLR that I talked about. That still continues to work the same way that we have been developing for 15 years. There is no change in that. That's a stable platform. ASP.NET Core 1.0 is still in release candidate. So that's what you need to understand. There are two frameworks that you can now target your ASP.NET applications, but that depends on what you want to do. Do you want to be on Windows only? Yeah, no doubt it's ASP.NET 4.6, right? It's the full stack, full CLR, IIS integration, blah, 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 all those things. I wouldn't go core there. But anytime I have a need for my ASP.NET application to be hosted or to be run on a non-Windows platform, well, that's a straight ASP.NET Core 1.0. I hope that's the meaning that I want to bring out here, and I hope you all get that. That's the only difference. I have two things coming up. Okay, that's okay. So let me see if, yeah, there you go. So this is actually a ASP.NET Core 1.0 application running in Azure. So let me show you the URL. So this is programs, zoom it. So there you go. So this is running on my Azure portal. On my Azure account. As you can see, it says BLR Cloud Roadshow.azurewebsites.net. So that I just hosted in the morning in the interest of the time. And this is ASP.NET Core 1.0, right? So there's no change. It's the same MVC app that you guys build. It's all in the hosting, and then it's all in those changes that you do. So how do you work with ASP.NET Core 1.0? Well, if you have installed Visual Studio, you just go and then say file new project. Just give it a minute. Yeah, so there you go. So you just go and then say Visual C# web ASP.NET web application. I'm going to say core web app 2 or 3, and then I'm going to say okay. And notice here, of course, it is still saying ASP.NET 5. Don't worry. In the next iteration, I think there will be an update just for the tooling, wherein they will go and then rename all these things to ASP.NET Core 1.0 template. So there's an empty template, there's a web API template, and there's a web application template. So let me pick up web application. Notice here, I have a checkbox right within the Visual Studio to say that, hey, go ahead and then check this, and then we will host this particular Core 1.0 application in Azure, right? So for now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just select web application, and I'll say okay. Of course, there's a question on the questions panel. The project solution structure bit vary from ASP.NET MVC. I'm regularly seeing live ASP.NET discussion. So there's no change per se, but the only change that you will see is something called as www root folder, and you are supposed to put all your client-side assets like JavaScript, images, CSS files, HTML files, which is static in nature, into inside this www root folder. This is actually a influence from the open source web applications, for example, Ruby on Rails, or all those web application frameworks. They follow this terminology wherein these client-side static assets are all kept inside this folder, whereas your dynamic things are all outside. So similarly, you have your controllers, views, models intact. There's no change in that. But all the client-side assets like jQuery, Bootstrap, Kendo UI, all these things are bought through something called as Bower. Bower is a package manager for client-side things, and all the server-side things are all bought through NuGet. You can actually use npm for any things. I think Bower is going to go away, and then everybody will start using npm. There's JSPM, so blah blah blah. So all those things. So that's the only change. How a page execution will for multiple clicks, please elaborate. Well, that's not the focus of this webinar. Sorry about that. You will need to go back to fundamentals of how a ASP.NET lifecycle works. A page lifecycle is what you should actually look for. So this is how you create a ASP.NET Core 1.0 application. Notice here I have the same controllers, I have the models, I have the view models, I have the views, or view model is something that you do. And then of course notice there's no web.config. That's the change that you will see in a this particular type of applications. The core 1.0, it has something called as projects.json. So let's take a quick look at that. So I need to jump into Linux soon. So let me first do it here. So I'm just opening up the project.json. So no more web.config. It's going to be everything in project.json. You define your project inside this file, saying like, I have so and so dependency. I have so and so version of this particular application is so and so. This is my dependency. Let me, yeah, and then there are certain things called as command. Notice here I have a command called web, and then I'm saying if I issue a command called web on the command line, I need you to start this particular server called as Kestrel. So this is the server that Microsoft has written, microsoft.aspnet.server.kestrel. So that's what we're going to be using. And notice here I have two this is the core 5.0, or this is the core 1.0 runtime, and then I'm also kind of targeting something called as DNX 4.5.1. That's the .NET framework 4.5.1, right? So my app can target multiple frameworks. That's what it's going to be interesting from going forward. And some of the other things, like whenever I need to pre-publish it, run these things. So there's an npm install, bower install, gulp, all those things. From a folder perspective, this is what you see. There is this www root folder. Notice here css, images, js, libraries, all those things are kept inside the www root folder, whereas your controllers are all intact, your models are all intact, your views are all intact. There's no change in that. So that's what I said. The only change that happens here is how you manage your dependencies. Let me kind of expand this dependencies. There you go. So I have used Bower to get Bootstrap jQuery, and I've used npm to get this task runner called as Gulp. So I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago where I talked about JavaScript task runner. So if you want to know what a Gulp is, what a grunt is, so you can go take a look at that. So we bring in Gulp dependencies using npm. We bring in any client-side libraries using Bower. So that's where this project structure is going to. And there's a gulp file where you write all the tasks. For example, let me show you a couple of tasks here. So what am I saying? I'm saying clean the CSS. So you use a library and then you say like, hey, go delete everything in the CSS, and then there's a minification. So you take a certain number of JavaScript files, and then you will say uglify, or uglify is nothing but minification, and you will concat more than one Javascript files into one thing. So this is something that you will be seeing as a difference from what we typically have been doing, but it's for the good. That's how majority of the open source web frameworks follow, and then we are going towards that side. So that's it. And I can now come in here and then do this. Notice here it is showing me IIS Express, and then it is showing me web. So IIS Express means now this ASP.NET Core 1.0 will be hosted by IIS and then run from there. Or if I pick up web, you will see what happens now. Let me say take web, and then I'm going to say run. You will notice a command prompt coming up now. So what that does is it's going to run the DNX commands. The command is DNX web, meaning host this. So there you go. So the command prompt has come up now. Let's give it a couple of more seconds. There we go. So we have a command prompt which has come up now, and then it says hosting environment development, now listening on HTTP localhost colon 5000, application has started, press Control C to shut down. Now I can just go in and then to a browser and then do HTTP localhost colon 5000. That's it, and then I will have my web application coming up now. Right, this is the first time, so it's priming up, so don't worry. So there you go. You can see that it's now running from Kestrel, and the Kestrel is doing an output of whatever it is trying to do. It is saying, hey, I'm serving this file. Sorry about that. And this is the application, so home, about, contacts, right? So that's what it is. So let me shut this down, and let me go back here. And of course I can go and then do the IS expressway or all those things. Another interesting feature is, let me go and then do this. So with ASP.NET 5, I'm going to open up home controller. I will have this guy stacked to the left, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to one particular file here in the views, and then I will say home, and I will say view with browser. View in browser. Okay, so on the right hand side now you'll see a browser coming up. So I'm not running the project actually, so here is my browser. So I just said, hey, view this in the browser, right? So it's been served, correct? Mind you, in my Visual Studio I have not run this. Okay, this is just a feature that Visual Studio gives, wherein, so this is whatever I'm doing is a developmental task. So I'm developing now. I want to go to about screen. Well, I don't like this your application description page. So what I want to do is I want to say cross-platform ASP.NET rocks, right? And I just want to save it. I just saved it on the left hand side. Notice here I'm not running it. I'm going to come on the right hand side. I'm just going to do an F5, and then you will notice the changes coming up. There you go. Cross-platform ASP.NET rocks. Mind you, I did not have to build it. So this is what Microsoft is coming up with ASP.NET Core. When you're developing, you don't need to do all this build, blah, blah, blah. You know, make a change, save it, come back here, refresh. That's it, done. You're done with that. Your productivity increases. That's done using Roslyn, the compiler that Microsoft open source. So what Roslyn does is it does on-the-fly compilation of your code. It sees that, oh, there's a code change, so okay, let me rebuild it and then do it. You don't have to manually do a Control-Shift-B. This is the fantastic piece in the ASP.NET Core 1.0 that's coming up. Okay, so that's on the Windows side of the things. So I hope you got the idea. So now let's jump back to Linux and then see how we can do the same stuff. So here, remember I talked about, so let me take a Linux installation now. Mind you, this is a non-Windows, and then you don't have a Visual Studio, or you don't have any GUI things here, or maybe GUI things are there, but with the ASP.NET or with all those things, there's nothing, right? So what you will need to do is, as of now, the ASP.NET Core 1.0 has been tested on Ubuntu 14.04. So X Ubuntu that I am running is actually a variant of Ubuntu, and it's 14.04 version. That's the latest stable version. So first thing that you will need to do is install the DNVM. So the instructions have been given here. Okay, now I have problem with my Zoom it. Okay, just give me a second. it won't run inside the VM. So all you need to do is go run this dnvm. So notice here in my slide deck, I had pointed the steps. So install dnvm, right? So you will need to install the dnvm. So that's what the instruction says. You got to run this in your Linux. So I've already done all this stuff, and then I need to install dnx for .NET Core. So that's what I meant here. Install dnx and core CLR. So you will follow this particular commands on the Linux to get the DNX on your the .NET execution environment on your Linux. Then you just say dnvm upgrade -r core CLR, meaning I'm saying .NET version manager to upgrade a particular runtime called as core CLR to the latest. Right, I want it to get the latest one. So the latest one as of now is so let me show you that. So I'm back to my Windows, and then in the Windows also what I can do is I can go and then say dnvm list. It will list all the frameworks that I have installed on my machine now. And this is what I have. I have a core CLR, and then I also have the DNX 4.5.1 kind of thing. So we call it as RC1 update 1 or RC1 update 1 core CLR, right? So that's what it is. Even on the Linux system, I can pretty much go and then do that. So if you have finished this particular thing, I can do the same thing, dnvm list. So let me show you that. So I can go to a terminal. So terminal is nothing but command prompt for the Windows world. So let me get this guy a little bit more. Okay, there you go. So I can come in here and then I can say dnvm list. And on this machine, on this Linux machine, I only have the RC1 update core CLR because this is a non-Windows platform. So core CLR is what runs on this non-Windows platform. So I have put up, or I have already done this installation. So I have 1.0 RC1 update 1 of core CLR, right? And then once you're done with that, you will need to install the Kestrel prerequisites on your Linux machine. So that is also given here. Of course, you will need to follow all these steps. So what I will do is I'll maybe create a video where I go through one by one, and then it will be easier for you guys to follow up. I'll come back with that video. So this is the um, series of commands that you will need to run. And once you've done that, you will be able to get the Kestrel to run on this Linux system. So now with this, you're done with whatever you need to do in terms of the getting the ASP.NET Core on a Linux system. But remember, I need to create a project on this Linux system. So what do I do? For that, you will need to go ahead and then do something else. So let me show you that. So I'm going to go back to this particular. So we will need to do this. What is it? We will need to first install Node.js, npm, and then Yeoman, right? So I've already done that. You will need to install the Node.js. You will need to install the npm, and then you will need to install the Yeoman. So let me show you that. So I have Node, which is version 5.6.0, which is the latest one, and then I have npm, which is 3.6.0. Again, it's the latest, and then I have the that's the Yeoman. So I think I missed whatever. Yeah, so that the Yeoman is ready. So that's what. Oh, sorry. So Yeoman is installed. So you will need to install these things, and then you will need to install something called as npm install -g generator -asp.net. So Yeoman is just a code generator, right? So what you need to do is you need to install this npm install -g generator asp.net. And once you do that, then you can do this. If you say yo asp.net, this is what it does. It does what kind of application do you want to create? So let's do that now. So I'm going to go and then go one step above, and I will say so I'm assuming you have installed DNX, you have installed DNVM, you've installed Node, you have installed NPM, you have installed you installed Yo ASP.NET Generator. So assuming everything is done, and then you are on a Linux 64-bit machine, let me now immediately create the same ASP.NET application here. So all you need to do is I just need to say Yo ASP.NET. and it will go ahead and then scaffold me. There you go. It is asking me, hey, what kind of application do you want to create, right? So notice here, I'm not sure you can see that, but yeah, I cannot zoom in anymore. And I'm saying empty console or a web. So I'm going to take web application. Okay, I'm going to click on that, and it's asking me what's the name of your ASP.NET application. Core web app, let's say 1. Right, there you go. The whole project has been created now, and it is asking me, hey, you should do a cd core web app 1 called dnu restore, and then do a dnx web. That is as simple as it can get, right? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to first cd into my core web app 1, then I will say dnu restore. This is nothing but, if you had a NuGet package in your machine, I mean in your project, you will pretty much go and then do a package restore. So that's what I'm doing. I just created the project. I have to just upgrade or update the packages. So I'm just saying dnu restore. So it's going to take a little bit of time. Let's wait for it. It should have cached, but let's give it a couple of minutes. So it's, yeah, I think it is done now because everything was cached. So it's getting everything from the cache. Yeah, so there you go. So I have done the dnu restore. All I need to do now is, okay, let me, somebody asked what editor do I use in a Linux, right? So Visual Studio Code is a fantastic, so you can go to code.visualstudio.com. So that's what I have done here on this Linux machine. I already gone ahead and then downloaded this Visual Studio. So it, remember, see this, the fantastic thing that this website does. It detects what platform I am on. So it looked at and then said, oh, you are on a Linux x64. So download Visual Studio Code for Linux x64, right? So I've already done that. So what I can do now is I can go in here and then I can say code dot. So now this is going to open up the Visual Studio Code, and then notice the source code is a C# running inside inside Linux. The same project that you saw. It's the same project.json. There you go. Dependencies, entity framework.command, SQLite, blah, blah, blah. Commands is web, Microsoft.asp.NET Server.kestrel. Frameworks, well, I don't need DNX 451. I can keep it there as is, but yeah, I don't need it actually. Then DNX Core 50. It's the same stuff. And then let me show you my controllers. It's the same C#, right? Home controller, then I can do this. I think, yeah, I don't have any suggestions because I think, let me see this guy. Yeah, I think I have not run the one of the prerequisites to get this IntelliSense working, but that's not a problem. But you're seeing here, like Visual Studio Code can neatly give you the color combinations, saying like, hey, this is an interface, this is a identifier, this is the name of the function or method or whatever it is, right? So I've done that. Now I can go back to the terminal. So I'll need to open up one more terminal. Okay, now. So now, oh, sorry. I can just say DNX web. That's it. Now I am inside the execution environment, and then I have told the execution environment to host this web app now. So what DNX will do is it will run the Kestrel and it will pick a port. I think it is 5000, and then it will say, hey, yeah, the web application is now running at port 5000. Go ahead, browse to that. So let's give it a minute. Maybe I have other things running. So let me. No, it's already okay. It's hosted now. It says hosted hosting environment production. Now listening on HTTP localhost 5000. So I can click on that. I believe it will open up in my browser. Okay, let me go to localhost colon 5000. And we should see the same MVC app running inside Linux. So what this proves is, there you go. I just created MVC app right inside Linux and hosted it on the Linux, right? Typically in a production environment, what you will do is you will go to Windows machine, and then maybe you're developing on Windows machine. All you need is to generate an output. There's a very specific, let me see if I can remember that. I forgot that piece of the things because I've been so happy with what I can do on a Linux, go DNX web and then just do it. I've been practicing more on that. I forgot the step. What you can do is you can generate an output from the Windows machine, copy that folder, keep it into your Linux system, and then just say DNX web. That's it. It just runs as is. So let me see what it is. So okay, let me come back to that. And here is the same application running inside the Linux now. So it's localhost colon 5000 slash home slash contact, blah, blah, blah. So all these things. So this is cross-platform ASP.NET web applications for you. This is what you should look for when you need your ASP.NET application to run on a non-Windows platforms. For example, somebody is creating a IoT, maybe IoT solution. They will have a Linux running on the board or on the device. That's the Raspberry Pi or anything, and you know C sharp. So now you need to create a web application which somebody can ping and then maybe see the data or whatever it is. Yeah, now you go. You can always create this particular thing using ASP.NET, right? That's all I had. So let me quickly see. Okay, and um, publish. Yeah, I think you can. This is what you should do. You can go to publish, and then in the profile what you should do is you can say file system. It is saying it is asking me what I should do, so I will say core app file system, and it is asking me the target location. By default what it does is it will go ahead and then create this in the same okay, let's go ahead and then do this. So let's come back to this. So this artifacts bin core app one release publish output. So I will say next, and it is asking me how do you want to publish it, debug or a release. I'm going to say the release, and notice this is what I was talking about. You can target the same application into different runtimes, right? Currently I'm targeting it to x86 rc1 update 1. That's a full CLR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I don't want that, give me a core CLR x64 rc1 update, right? And then I'm going to say next, and then it's your application will be published to so and so. I'll go do publish, and it's doing, Visual Studio is doing its job now. Yeah, so somebody is asking, do we need the produce output on build option while deploying to production? Yeah, that is how the intended workflow is. You don't take your source code and then put it onto a Linux box, but rather just create a published outputs, and then you can pretty much do that. So build started, project core app one configuration release any CPU, it's still building. So where will this be available? Well, this will be available here. So take a look at this, C colon workspace publish output. So let me go there. Oh, what happened? Okay, so first I need to go here, and I think web, yeah, artifact. So what it has done is it has created the artifacts folder, then bin, then core app one, and release publish output. It is still doing it, so it's still not done. So there you go. So it's doing the build here. So it says copying to output path, C colon users, publish temp, whatever, and then it has to finish this, and then we will see the output. Okay, and then you take that output, it's a folder, go to Linux system, place that into a folder, and then just go to your terminal and then say DNX run or DNX web. That's it, and then your website is hosted on a Linux server or a Linux box. Okay, so I think it's going to take a little bit of time for this to publish to be done. So I hope you get the point. And we are at the exact 1 hour mark. So that's all I had. So what I'm going to do is stop the recording and then get on to Q&A. So thank you very much for sitting through this webinar. I hope you learned something new, and I'm excited to see this ASP.NET on Linux. So look forward to your presence in our future webinars too, and I'm going to be stopping recording now and then get on to Q&A. Thank you.